Is up, YouTube? It's your boy Millzy, back with Hometown Commander. And per our usual arrangement, we're here to brew a deck. And we're not just here to brew any deck, friends. Brothers War is upon us. We have seen all of the spoilers for the set, for the precons, for everything. I took last week to take a little bit of a week off, get myself prepared for the Brothers War. I am very excited to make this content for you. So let's rock on into it. Who are we starting with? Well, I figured, why not start with the precons? A lot of people are going to do $50 upgrade guides, $100 upgrade guides. That's not really my thing, personally, because if you've watched any of my previous videos, I have a larger collection and I brew a little bit differently than that. And my hope is that you enjoy my takes on building these commanders. So today we're looking at Urza, Chief Artificer. Man, if you had told me when I first started Commander that one day I'd be messing around with an Urza list, I would tell you were crazy. But if there's one thing I've learned over the last 2 years, it's I love Esper color decks. I don't know what it is. I think the white part of me really enjoys the combination with black and blue. We get artifacts, we get good enchantments, we get cool planeswalkers, and I think we get a lot of interesting things. Now, Urza, we'll read the card quick and then we'll talk about where we want to take our deck. If you can do me a favor, like, comment, subscribe, toss down in the comments what Brothers War commanders you want to see. I promise I have 7 weeks, if not more, of Brothers War content planned. Not only just Brothers War commanders, but decks using Brothers War cards and things like that, kind of like I did for the Merfolk for Dominator United. But let's get into it. Urza, Chief Artificer, 3 white, blue, black. For a 4/5 legendary human artificer. Affinity for artifacts. This spell costs 1 less to cast for each artifact you control. Artifact creatures you control have menace. And at the beginning of your end step, create a 0/0 construct artifact creature token. With this creature gets +1/+1 for each artifact you control. So there's a lot of ways I think we can take Urza. I could see a lot of people going for the populate route on the bottom for the construct tokens. I can see people playing around with a lot of different things. What I'm going to try to do is mend those bottom 2 abilities together, giving all of our artifact creatures menace and then getting us a construct at the end of every turn. So what I really want to do with Urza, and I feel like a broken record every time I build an Esper deck, but I want to go wide with artifacts. We're going to have a ton of, we're going to try to get some power stones. We're going to try to get some treasures. We're going to try to get some clues. We're going to try to get a bunch of artifacts. And I'd love to end the game with a Rise and Shine or a Cyber Awakener to animate all of our artifacts and make them into creatures and win the game that way. We have something like March of Progress, which is just going to straight copy each creature token we have. We get to use fun things like Time Sieve to sacrifice artifacts to take extra turns. I think there's a lot of fun stuff on the playground here to use. We just kind of have to start careening it down into something that's usable. So if you're new to the channel, the format here is that I build all of these decks basically from scratch. I used to do it all the way from 0 cards in the deck, but those led to hour-long videos where people weren't necessarily watching the entire thing, and that's cool with me. So what I decided to do was, sitting before us is my 136 card. Basically, this is what I want the deck to be, kind of. And so now we just got to make our cuts. We're going to talk through what do we want the deck to do, what fits our strategy, and start talking about what cards are integral, what cards aren't, and kind of trying to figure out what does our deck look like? What does our deck function like? And then we're going to end the video with a completed list of 100 cards with a bunch of cards in the maybe board for us to consider. And then we're going to play test a couple turn 1 through 3 through 4, type things so we can see how the deck runs. So let's start in the art. Let's start in the land base. I think because we're going to go wide with artifacts, we really can utilize cards like Cranial Plating and Nettle Cyst to get a bonus for how many artifacts we have. I'm also using something like All That Glitters to do the same thing. So I think we want as many artifact lands as possible. So we're going to use the Ancient Den, Seed of the Synod, and Vault of Whispers that come in the precon. But I think we also want to use the Modern Horizons 2 artifact lands that also come in the precons. Razortide Bridge, Mist Vault Bridge, and Goldmire Bridge. That's just going to allow us to have more artifacts down. Some of our things like Mox Opal have Metalcraft, where they can do a certain ability as long as we have 3 or more artifacts, and we want to hit that as quickly as possible. So I've added a bunch of those. I think the 3 lands that I'm already kind of probably out on are the bounce lands. I think we're going to have plenty of good times without them. We are probably going to be playing a lot of straight up artifacts anyway, and I think we're going to be playing a lot of mana artifacts to begin with. So I don't think we'll need those. I kind of like the... in most of my decks, at least 3 colors, I play the fetches, the shock lands, the new Innistrad slow lands. I like to play the commander lands, the one that come in tapped unless you have 2 or more opponents. And then I do like, for these non-green decks, I like the filter lands just because they help you kind of get your mana to where it needs to be. As well as I am running the 2 white-themed pain lands because I have a feeling that white and black are going to be really important. So is blue. So I've tried to kind of like space my lands out. I bet you if we go look here, 25, 24, 44. So we're a little more into blue than white and black, but I have a gut feeling that once we cut some cards, that's going to even more out. So what I was trying to do was kind of spread my lands over the entire 3 color basis to get good. I'm choosing to play Arcane Sanctum here just because it comes in the precon. I'm not a giant fan of the tap tri-lands, but I understand why they're really popular. So what I'm going to do is use this deck as an opportunity to prove myself wrong, because I think it will. We get to play the Darksteel Citadel, coming in as another artifact land. We threw the City of Brass in there. I just think it'll end up helping out. We have Exotic Orchard. More often than not, we're going to sit down to a table and someone is going to be playing at least one of our colors, if not more than one. So we're going to use that to our benefit. We have things like Urza Saga, which is going to allow us to go get Crypt or Soul Ring or plenty of other amounts of different artifacts. We have Retrofitter's Foundry. We have Mox Opal, Mox Amber, Crypt. I don't think we can get the capsule because it isn't 0. Chrome Mox, we've got plenty of artifacts we can go get with Urza Saga. So Urza Saga is going to go really well for us. Then we have Treasure Vault. If we can make a lot of colorless mana, we can dump it into here and get a lot of treasures. The cool part about Power Stone tokens is it says it can't be used to cast a non-artifact spell. Doesn't say anything about activating abilities. So maybe if we can make some Power Stones, dump a bunch of mana into this Treasure Vault, get a bunch of treasures, and then, go that route as well. Like I said, I've tried my best to put together the best list I could to spread our reach of artifacts across the board. What I think we need to do right now is kind of decide what way we're going to go and start narrowing in. You can see we have 20 creatures. I think this will end up coming down because I think I would want to rely on cards like Efficient Construction, Mirrodin Besieged, Thopter Spy Network, these kind of things to make me artifact creatures as I cast artifact spells. I'd like to keep the artifact numbers really high, just so that we can always have good value out of our cards like Nettle Cyst and Cranial Plating, but also because there are just generally a lot of really good artifacts. And this is really truly the first deck I've ever built that played with artifacts on their own. Alayla was a deck that cares a lot about enchantments and artifacts, and I'm using artifacts for my benefit. I've had other decks in the past, like Kess, where the artifacts are there just for mana production, but they're not really there for value. I think this is the first real deck I'm building where artifacts actually matter. And so it's going to be kind of interesting over the process of talking through this deck to figure out what cuts do we make, and I'm going to have to be probably leaning a little bit less on the heavy creature decks that I'm used to really relying on artifacts and spells to put ourselves forward. Urza is not coming down as soon as we hit 6 mana Probably, unless we have nothing else better to do. I think this is one of those decks where we really want to set up, get our engine going, and then bring Urza down when we can protect it and kind of mine the value. So I think first let's start. We did the lands, got them down to 34. I think that's perfect with the amount of artifacts we're going to be running and how many of them tap for mana. We're not going to have many issues there. I want to start with the enchantments, and let's talk about whether or not, do they all work? Do I think they're all going to be good? And are any of them unrealistic for this artifacts go wide strategy? I think it's funny that I find myself building token decks because a lot of the normal decks that I play are a little bit too strong for my play group. And so I find that these token go wide decks are a little fairer. They have more of a window for interaction, and I find them easier to kind of stop. Whereas your high power combo decks, right, the window of stopping them comes down to instant speed. So I like these go wide decks. That's the reason I've loved my Layla deck, and I love my Jetmir deck, is because they go wide. You have to, in all reality, you're going to have to pass the turn and wait for the turn to come back around before you can win the game. Very rarely with these decks are you winning the game on the same turn that you set up, and so it allows your opponents to have that room to respond. Whereas maybe my Miram deck or some of my Simic Cascade deck, those kind of decks can literally just produce so much mana, so much value in one turn that they can end the game without your opponents realizing it. So, like I said, let's go through the enchantments and let's see what we're looking at here. First up, All That Glitters. I mentioned it before. I like All That Glitters because it gives a creature +1/+1 for each artifact or enchantment we control, and we're gonna have a ton of them. I see this as a finisher for putting this on a big artifact creature, which would potentially have Menace with Urza, putting it on Urza and hitting somebody out for commander damage. We can do a lot of different things with All That Glitters, but I think it's a payoff for what we're already trying to do anyway. And so I think it's really important. Anointed Procession. Anointed Procession just feels right. So many things in this deck make, Urza makes constructs. So many other things make, mirror tokens or Thopters or these different types of things. So I think Anointed Procession becomes really important because it just doubles all of it. Urza making 2 0/0 constructs on our upkeep, on our end step instead of 1, just seems really good. Artificer class, I feel like this is the first deck I've ever built where this seems kind of interesting. So for 2 mana, it comes down. The first artifact we cast each turn costs 1 less. Immediately when it becomes level 2, we reveal from the top until we hit an artifact, put that artifact into your hand and the rest on the bottom. And then once we go up to 6 at the beginning of our end step, we create a token that's a copy of target artifact you control. I see so much of the upside of this card, but I also see the kind of awkwardness of it. I think there's other things in our deck that are just going to straight reduce things by 1 that might be a little bit better. But Artificer class is one of those cards that has me intrigued. Biotransference is the card I think that will do a lot less than you think it will until you actually see it churn out things. And then I think it's going to be really good. So the top half says all creatures you control are artifacts in addition to their other types. The same is true for all spells you control and other creature cards you own that are on the battlefield. So creatures in your hands are artifacts, creatures in your graveyard are artifacts, creatures in your deck are artifacts. That's great. But the second part is good too. Whenever you cast an artifact spell, you lose a life and you make a 2/2 Necron Warrior artifact creature token. So we're making more creature tokens that are artifacts, but also we're benefiting from them. So I think Biotransference is really good because if we choose to use other things to make tokens that aren't artifacts, this is going to help make them artifacts to use for different things. Black Market Connections just seems good. Getting that treasure and losing a life, just that little bit of ramp seems interesting. I could see a world where Black Market Connections comes out. Maybe we have so many artifacts already that we don't need the connections, but I feel like it probably deserves a spot. Efficient Construction, 4 mana. Whenever you cast an artifact, make a 1/1 Thopter. This is good because this is just going to hit the production. This works a lot like Psy Master Thopterist, where whenever we cast an artifact spell, we create a Thopter. These are the kind of things they're going to push our army wide, and I don't mind it being in the air if at all possible. It doesn't have to be on the ground. It can be in the air too. Luminarch Ascension is one of my pet cards. I love this card, and I think it works really well in a deck like this. You dump it down early if you have it. You only need to go a couple turns around the table, and we can start making tokens for 2 mana. We are going to have lots of mana at our disposal, and a lot of those Power Stones, if I recall, they say they can't be spent to cast a non-artifact spell. They don't say anything about abilities. So we have a ton of color. If we have a ton of colorless mana and just enough white to pump out a bunch of angels, I think it's just going to hold us alive. And then things like Biotransference are going to make them into artifacts and make them good anyway. I think this is just a net positive card. I have one in the stable binder, and I think it works really well in the slot. Mirrored and Besieged. It's very similar to Efficient Construction. We pick the mirror inside, and it makes us a 1/1 mirror artifact creature token whenever we cast an artifact spell. And if we pick the Phyrexian side, beginning of our end step, draw a card, then discard a card. Then if there are 15 or more artifact cards in your graveyard, target opponent loses the game. I doubt we'll ever hit the second half. I doubt we'll really want the top half to get those 1/1s and then use them for all of the different things we can do. Heuristic Study and Smothering Tide, that theirs are just commander value. We want those treasures. We want to draw those cards. We want to be putting ourselves through our deck. Remember, we have no true ramp except artifact ramp and card draw. So we need to take advantage of both of them. And I think these 2 cards are 2 really good cards for that. Tempered Steel. Artifact creatures you control get +2/+2. I have considered running like an intangible virtue instead of this, just because it gives all of our creatures +1/+1 in vigilance, whereas this says artifact creatures you control get +2/+2. I'm not out of the woods on that yet, because if a lot of our artifacts are going to be tokens that we're creating, I can see where intangible virtue becomes better. But if we're going to be also having all of these fun artifact creatures themselves, then I can see where Tempered Steel kind of takes its benefit too. So I think this is going to be one of those conversations we have probably when we get towards 100 or 103. We're going to have that conversation about what works better for the deck. And then Thopter Spy Network, at the beginning of your upkeep, if you control an artifact, make a 1/1. Whenever one or more artifact creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, draw cards. We get 2 sides to this card. One, getting a Thopter at the start of our turn. And the second, whenever our artifacts deal combat to a player, we draw a card. Thopter Spy Network is probably the worst. It's probably one of the worst Thopter producers in this list, because it's only on our turn, whereas things like Tezzeret Artifice Master do it once per turn, or Efficient Construction does it anytime we cast an artifact spell. But I think the Reconnaissance Mission Bident of Thassa effect that we get on the bottom, because of how many artifact creatures we're playing with, is going to keep refilling our hand and make it really important. So at the moment, I think I like all 11 of these. I can see why all of them are good in the deck. But I think I definitely know which I'm going to cut first if the slots come down to it. Let's talk about the planeswalkers that we're working with. First up is Tezzeret Master of the Bridge. I did not realize how good Tezzeret Master of the Bridge was until I read it for the first time. I mean, I've seen this card before, don't get me wrong. I played during War of the Spark. But to be honest, I think I never really paid much attention to the card. Top ability, creature and planeswalker you control have affinity for artifacts. So just like here, where this has affinity for artifact creatures, where it costs 1 less for each artifact creature you control, this is spells and planeswalker spells you cast. Creature and planeswalker spells cast have affinity for artifacts. So we have 5 artifacts. It's reducing all of these and all of these by 5. So, I mean, that's great for 6 mana alone, but then it gets even better. +2, it deals X damage to each opponent, where X is the number of artifacts you control, and then we gain X life. I can see our board state kind of being consistently at probably having more artifacts than our opponents expect. I could see this hitting for 15, 18, 20, and when we're in the late stage of the game, when we're making all these tokens, when we're doing these things, it's going to take players out. That with the chip damage from all of our artifact tokens, I think this is going to be one of those cards that's going to be a finisher in this deck. -3, return an artifact card from your graveyard to your hand, and then -8, exile the top 10 cards to your library. Put all artifact cards from among them on to the battlefield. So the ultimate there, the crazy part about this is a plus. This is a plus, guys. So we plus this twice, even if we have, let's say, 7 or 8, right? Or even 5. You know, I doubt this will coming out where we have less than 5 artifacts. So let's call it 5. That's 10 damage to all of our opponents. That's 30 damage total. and then we gain, 20 life over the process, and then exile the top 10 cards of our library and then do this. This seems like it's going to be pretty good, even on the worst case scenario where we have a smaller amount of artifacts out. But once we get a lot of artifacts out, I mean, it's +2. His +2 is almost strictly better than the -8. Even that -3, getting artifacts back is really cool. Tezzeret Artifice Master, probably my favorite Tezzeret ever been printed. +1, get a 1/1 Thopter. 0, draw a card. If we have 3 or more artifacts, draw 2. We are going to almost all of the time draw 2. I don't see a reason where we're not going to be able to, as soon as this can come down, draw 2 cards. And then the -9, at the beginning of your end step, search your library for a permanent card, put it on the battlefield, and shuffle your library. Doesn't care. Doesn't care that it's an artifact. Doesn't care what it is. If we ever ultimate Tezzeret, I can see this getting really out of hand, because I'm not even trying to combo in this deck. I haven't really looked into any like big brain Urza combos. The biggest thing I'm looking to do here is time sieve and never let my opponents untap. That's like the if we ever get enough artifacts, we could literally never let them untap and chip everyone away and win the game. That's like the high end thing of what I can think of, or master of bridging each opponent for like 20. That's the up end I'm thinking with this deck. I can only imagine what I could do if I was trying to actually combo hard out of this deck, and I'm sure someone's gonna make. I'm sure if you look up the original Urza lists, you can find some combos in these colors, or even go take a look at, go take a look at your Brea decks. I'm sure you'll find some decent artifact combos there, but that's not my intention. Okay, Karn the Great Creator. Activated abilities of artifacts your opponent's control cannot be activated. We get to play a one-sided Stony Silence, basically. Shut down all of our opponent's artifacts. We get to keep ours. +1. Up to 1 target non-creature artifact becomes an artifact creature with power toughness equal to its CMC. So we can take a decent-sized artifact, animate it, make it a creature until our next turn. That can block. That can do a lot of things. Could even go in for an attack. -2, you may choose an artifact card you own from outside the game or exile. Reveal that card and put it in your hand. A lot of you are going to say, but Millzy, outside the game, we can't get things from outside the game. And you're 100% right, but that does also say or in exile, which I feel like is going to come in handy at least randomly and more than you expect. If you had this card in your hand and someone's Plowshares or Path to Exiles your I'm not playing Blightsteel, but let's say they pathed your Blightsteel. Okay, put Karn down and get it back. Almost every creature card I'm playing are artifacts at the end of the day. So Karn is going to get back most of the creatures we're playing. And so, yes, 100%. And then Karn's Living Legacy. I was trying to figure out what deck this goes in when I read it for Dominator United. And I feel like it's here, mostly because of its emblem, but +1, we get a tapped treasure Power Stone token, so we can tap it at any time for colorless mana. Can't be used to spend a non-artifact spell. That's cool. We can use those tokens to cast more artifacts. We can do plenty of things with that. Pay any amount of mana, look at that many cards on the top of your library, put one of them into your hand and the rest on the bottom. If we really, really, really need a card and we have a spare mana, we can do this. We could use the tapped Power Stones to do this. We can do a lot of things with this. This is just to be honest, it's a meh, but I think it's still an upside. And then the -7, you get an emblem with tap an untapped artifact you control. This emblem deals 1 damage to any target. I don't mind if I can set up an unwinding clock or something like that. I don't mind using this emblem to just machine gun my opponents out of the game. I mean, unwinding clock is not going to be very hard to set up. And the other good part about unwinding clock is a lot of our artifacts tap for colored mana anyway, so we could leave counter spells and things like that open. I think that this emblem just gives us another path to winning the game. If we set up really hard, we have lots of artifacts. We go tutor for an unwinding clock. We get it set up. And then we just use Karn to nuke our opponents out of the game. The next upkeep, we untap all of our artifacts. And again, at instant speed, we nuke our opponents out of the game. So this seems like a kind of interesting top end for this deck. I was wondering if we were going to find any good, like, threats that didn't involve Rise and Shine or Cyberdrive Awakener, where you just turn all your artifacts into creatures and swing with Urza out to give them all menace. But I think I like these Tezzerets and these Karns because they're giving our deck some kind of oomph that isn't going to be obvious. Yes, for the people who are playing against us that know what these do, they're going to straight look at them and go, I need to get rid of that because you're going to do something with it. Yep, that's fair. I'll take it. Yeah, that's fair. But I think if we deploy them at the right time, we build the value with them, and then we use them properly. I feel like they're the kind of cards that are going to just win us the game. And I'm okay with that. Okay, well, let's go into the sorceries next. I don't really see many of these getting cut, but let's talk through them. Demonic Tutor. You can say what you want about tutors in Commander. I know a lot of people don't like them, but for a deck like this, where it's actually honestly cheaper to play straight tutors than it is something like Fabricate, we want the Demonic Tutor. So for me, the tutors aren't that big of a problem for me. I can understand why some people may not like them, but for me, I think they're going to end up ironing out our list and really getting us the individual pieces we need at the right time. I think our deck is still a lot of a toolbox aristocrat, a toolbox artifact deck at the end of the day. But I think just the few tutors we can play are really going to help us out. So I'm playing Demonic Tutor. I have Demonic Tutor, Fabricate, and Imperial Seal in the list. I can probably see the argument why taking Fabricate out would be a decent argument, just because I'm also playing things like Vampiric Tutor and Enlightened Tutor as well. I don't see Enlightened Tutor. This is what happens when you don't... I thought I had. It looks like my list didn't copy over. Okay, when I'm playing things like those as well. So I feel like I can see a world where we don't need the extra tutor. We're going to probably want to also think about some card draw as well, because there's going to be some scenarios where I don't need a tutor. I need card draw to get a couple more lands. So I think we don't want to go all tutors. All tutor city, play so many tutors. But I can understand why Fabricate's a good tutor. It's just that there's so many black tutors that are better for the mana cost. I think even a Diabolical Intent is straight up better than Fabricate for one less mana, where all I have to do is sacrifice a creature to get a card as well. So I think I'll even add that. Worst case scenario, we cut this and we put it in the side. But I think even Diabolic Intent plays a better role than even Imperial Seal, because it gets it to our hand, and we're going to have extra creatures laying around. March of Progress, again, a card that I really like the look of. We just straight copy our creature tokens. If we have any way to give them haste, that would be helpful as well. But for 6 and a blue, we literally copy every artifact creature we control, which seems like it's still pretty good. I think this is a rise and shine of sorts. We got to make sure we have any haste and Bros. If we don't, I still feel like this is good because it can copy the things we really need. But I can see where this is kind of a trap as well. So I think March of Progress is one of those cards where I don't know how to judge this card until I play with it. Ponder, Preordain, I don't think we need both. I feel like we're going to have a decent amount of card draw. I mean, we're also playing Brainstorm. Maybe we really do need both. Maybe we keep both in for now. That early game card draw is going to become really important. Okay, Rise and Shine. Again, one of our finishers here. Target non-creature artifact you control becomes a 0/0 artifact creature. Put 4+1/+1 counters on each artifact that became a creature. This way, for 6 mana, all of our non-creature artifacts become artifacts, and then we basically try to swing out for game. Rise and Shine is a really fun card. I've seen a lot of use of this in some of my Galazeth lists and other artifact lists I've tried in the past. I think Rise and Shine is exactly what we want for this deck. It is going to end the game if our board is big enough. And so Rise and Shine is kind of one of those key cards, kind of like Cyberdrive Awakener, which does the same thing, except this is 6 mana on a creature. And it says other artifact creatures you control have flying. So not only does it give them all make them all creatures, but then it puts them all in the air. So I think having both of these is huge. The other good thing about Rising Shine, I guess, is it can do it for one if you want. I doubt how often that would come in handy. The other thing about March of Progress that looks kind of good is it can combo with Time Sieve and give us more extra turns. So I guess that's another option there. Supreme Verdict, I don't know, still one of my favorite board wipes. Can't be countered, gets rid of everything. I can see the argument for playing the destroy all non-artifact creature board wipes, but I think more often than not, we're going to be playing at an advantage in this deck. And if we're board wiping, it's because we're behind. And I think I'm fully willing to give up every artifact creature I have in order to do that. The last thing that I want is to wipe away all of my non-artifact creatures and not wipe away enough of everybody else's creatures. So if literally nuking the entire board is what needs to happen, I think I'm content with that. The other thing that we can do here is pair this up with something like a flawless maneuver to protect all of our creatures that way. Or if we're playing Darksteel Forge, we can get around that way. So I think I'm okay with that. The other new card that I'm kind of interested in is a Terracier's Devastation, X2 black. You lose X life and create X tapped Power Stone tokens. Then all creatures get -1/-1 until end of turn for each artifact you control. This seems kind of interesting as a board wipe, especially if you're very behind, because this is just going to make a ton of Power Stones, and then it's going to probably nuke. I mean, I can't think of a scenario unless we are literally on only lands and we cast this for as little as possible. I don't see a scenario where this doesn't just nuke the table and give us so many Power Stones that the next time we untap, we can just do some gross things. I think this is just a great board wipe, one, and two, I think it works even better for this deck list because we're benefiting off the board wipe. We're not even just board wiping, we're benefiting off the board wipe. So I don't see a scenario where this doesn't work out well for us. Their Name is Legion is probably the one card in here. I get it, but it has me interested. It says to create X tap 2/2 black Necron warrior artifact creature tokens. Then you gain life equal to the number of artifacts you control. Exile it. You may play it from your graveyard. The reason this interests me is stuff like this, which gives all of our spells affinity and things like, are we playing Inspired Statuary? It doesn't look like we are, but, and then the power tokens can't. They cannot. So if we have a ton of mana, we can make a ton of artifact creatures and then gain a bunch of life. I think this is going to go in the maybe board because as much as I can see it really working, I can also see some downsides to it. And I think it's just going to come down to what the rest of our list looks like after we cut some more cards. And then Urza's Ruinous Blast, really fun board wipe. But again, I think as much as it's cool that it's Urza, it has Urza on it and it's an Urza card. I don't think it fits the spot. I think we have better things we can do. So let's go down to the instance. Okay. We want to try to get a lot of bang for our buck here. So we have a card. Access Denied is a card I kind of want to try. 5 mana, counter target spell, create X/1/1 Thopter tokens with flying, where X is that spell's mana value. If we can get out Unwinding Clock, I feel like Access Denied is a card that can probably just push us through and win us a game, depending on what's going on. The other thing I like about Access Denied is it's a high price to pay, but if we pick it at the right time for it, it's a really good card, which has me interested. I see the good side. I see the bad side to it. I just think I want to try it. I want to try it and see if it fits the spot. And if it doesn't, I'm plenty content to take it out for something else. But it's something that I want to give a good go to. Anguished, I'm making one of the single best exile removal spells we have access to. Hits any non-land permanent, we lose 3 life. Brainstorm, some more card draw. Psych Rift, one of the best blue removal spells in the game. Bounce everything our opponents control back to their hand. If you pick this at the right time, this is one of the best tempo plays you can make and will probably end the game in our favor, depending on the board state. If we can Cyclonic Rift on someone else's turn into a Rise and Shine on our turn, that's probably the single best playline I can think of to end the game. But I think more often than not, it will push people and clear the way for us to win the game. Deadly Rollick, again, as long as we control Urza, this is a free cast that exiles a creature. If it's not, it's 4 mana. Very expensive if we don't have Urza out, but if we have Urza out, one of the cheapest spells, one of the, it's just free. Despark, I think we end up having enough removal other than Despark, even though I really, really like Despark. I just think we're going to run out of room for removal. Dispatch. Tap target creature, but if we have 3 or more artifacts, we exile that creature. I cannot think of a scenario where we won't have 3 or more artifacts when we see this. I think this is literally always going to be a path to exile, Swords to Plowshares. I can't see a scenario realistically in this deck where between the artifact lands we have and the straight up artifacts we have, that this doesn't just become a path to exile. And for that reason, I think it's really, really good. Enlighten Tutor, any artifact, any enchantment, put it on top. This is great. Someone else's turn, we can Enlighten Tutor for the thing we need. And this gets literally any relevant artifact creature in our deck, any artifact card in our deck, or any enchantment in our deck. This is perfect. First Guardianship, again, if we control Urza, it's free. Flawless Maneuver, all of our creatures indestructible for free. These 2 in Deadly Rollick are kind of auto-includes to me, but I can even see the argument where Deadly Rollick comes out for some of this other 1 mana exile removal we have, because we'll almost always have the access to the 1 mana. Generous Gift, you could probably make a good argument that Generous Gift comes out for Despark, because Despark is going to hit more of the more relevant things. My only, worry is that we have Void Rent and we have Anguished Unmaking. How often are we trying to get rid of things that aren't creatures? So I'm not sure. I think more often than not, we're going to be getting rid of creatures, and I think I'm willing to take that risk. Path to Exile, Swords to Plowshares. Then we go 2 more pieces of creature removal. Teferi's Protection. I think a well-timed Teferi's Protection could absolutely save our butts in this deck. Vamp Tutor for another tutor. Void Rend, again, destroy any non-land permanent. I think I'd rather play this over Generous Gift, just because it can't be countered. And then War of Invention. The only thing that intrigues me about War of Invention over Fabricate is we can do it at instant speed and we can improvise for it. We go to get something with extra less put on the battlefield and stuff for your library. I mean, I think the absolute nuts play, this would be the best thing we could do, would be War of Invention for a Darksteel Forge and just completely rout our opponents and make our whole board indestructible and get her on a board wipe or something like that. But I wonder how many times out of 10 War of Invention does better than any of our tutors. But at the same time, instant speed makes a ton of difference. We could hold some mana up, making people think that we have a counterspell, and then War of Invention on someone's end step to get something. So I think I really like War of Invention for that reason over something like Fabricate, because it's instant speed and it does some things. So I'm going to do is I'm going to pull out the seal here for now, leave in the invention, and see what that does for our numbers. We talked about our lands, we talked about our sorceries, talked about our enchantments. Let's talk about our creatures next, and then we'll get into our straight up artifacts last, because I know that the artifact number will come down, but I still think it's going to be high. But again, I think it'll still be useful to go through the creatures next. So the creature list here is a mix between what I thought was relevant from the precon and some things from the set. So the first thing I did, and this is where if you told 2 years ago me that I was going to be playing more than 1 Urza in a deck, I probably would have puked. Urza Lord High Artificer. Oh, I have so much disdain for this card, but this card is so good in this deck. When it comes in, you get a 0/0, just like the other one. Tap an untapped artifact we control for a blue mana. 5 mana, shuffle your library, exile the top card until end of turn. You can play that card without paying its mana cost. With enough artifacts, we could play our entire library. This card's just gross. I genuinely don't have a list of many commanders that I refuse to play against, but I've yet to see a fair Urza Lord Artificer deck, and so it's on that list. But I think it fits exactly what we want to do in this deck. It's going to literally take our entire artifact plan and ramp it forward. So why wouldn't you play it? I want to make this meld to Urza work. I can see a world where this milled Urza does nothing in this deck. But I think it only fits to play these, these two Urzas we got. I'm not playing the baby Urza that we got in Dominaria United. I'm playing these two though, because getting our artifact instants and sorceries to cost less is just really good. And then they go ahead and meld. Does it show me? It melds with the Might and the Meek Stone into Urza Planeswalker, and this card is just crazy. During each of your turns, you can play them twice. +2, they cost 2 less to cast, and that stacks. If we do it more than once, you gain 2 life. +1, draw 2 cards, discard 1, 0, make 2 soldier to artifact tokens. -3, exile target unland permanent. -10, everything. Artifacts and planeswalkers you control get indestructible, destroy all non-land permanents. I think if you ever meld this into Urza Planeswalker, I think Urza Planeswalker is more than worth the effort. It's just going to be, are we playing enough artifact tutors to see the Might and the Meek Stone, the Might Stone and the Weak Stone? Are we seeing enough of them? I don't know. I mean, we'll honestly, we'll have to just find out. But I think it's worth it. The juice is worth the squeeze here, and I want to see it happen. Then we have our Urza Prince of Krug. Artifact creatures you control get +2/+2. So for 4 mana, we're getting a +2/+2 buff. And then 6, create a token that's a copy of target artifact you control, except it's a 1/1 soldier creature in addition to its other types. This seems really cool because we can just copy, if we ever have that much mana and nothing to do with it, we can copy mana rocks, we can copy lots of other things. So Prince of Krug seems really interesting, and I think it fits the deck well. Thopter Assembly is in here because it combos with Time Sieve, but I almost feel like we won't need it. I almost feel like we won't need these. If you control no Thopters other than Thopter Assembly, return it to its owner's hand and create 5. I almost feel like we won't need it. I feel like we're going to be making so many other artifacts that Time Sieve is going to have plenty of them to use. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'll end up needing Thopter Assembly. But I have a gut feeling we're not going to need it. The Reality Chip, look at the top creature library at any time. When it's attached to a creature, you may play lands and cast spells from the top of your library. This just seems really, really good to cast things off the top. If we can't draw enough cards, we can cast things off the top, and it is an artifact, so it's gonna get the menace. It's gonna get these buffs. It can be tapped for different things, so I really like it. Shimmer Dragon, as long as you control 4 more artifacts, it has hexproof, and we can tap 2 to draw a card. I can see where the benefit of Shimmer Dragon is, but I actually kind of feel like we're not going to need it. I feel like we're going to have so many other value sources that we're not going to need the Shimmer Dragon for it. Sharding Sphinx, this is from the deck as well. Whenever an artifact creature you control deals combat damage to a player, you may create a 1/1 Thopter with flying. Again, I feel like this might actually be just too expensive for what we're trying to do. I think that we need the creatures and the other things in this deck need to really print us value, like Sai Master Thopterist. Whenever we cast an artifact spell, create a 1/1. Every one of our artifact creatures is going to count for that. Every one of our artifacts is going to count for that. There's a lot of things that are going to end up giving us a lot of good things with Sai, and so I think it is more than worth the slot. Mirror Battlesphere was like the one card I wasn't sure about on first glance. Not because it's not a good card. I think Mirror Battlefield is a great card. Whenever there's a battlefield, we get 4 1/1 mirror tokens, and then whenever it attacks, we can tap on tap mirror tokens and give it +0/+0 and deals X damage to the player or planeswalker it's attacking. This seems really, really good as a top end thing. Attach a cranial plating or a nettlesis to it, and it probably just wins you the game on attack, or knocks a player out on an attack. So I really like the Mirror Battlesphere. I'm just slightly worried about this 7 mana cost and it not having haste. But what I know for sure is that I'm going to be wrong. I'm going to think that, and the first time this thing hits the battlefield in one of my games, I know I'm going to be wrong. So it's going to win there, and it's good. Muzio, Visionary Architect, 3 and a blue. Look at the top X cards of your library, where X is the highest mana value among artifacts you control. Put any artifact card from among them onto the battlefield. Put the rest onto the bottom of your library in any order. This seems really good because it's just going to start start ramping us up. Like the thing that I thought about Muzio is you look at the top X cards, and if we hit a Darksteel Forge off the top and put it down, we just printed free value. Like I think Muzio is one of those cards that probably could be a trap, but I really want it to work, and so I'm gonna leave it in there. Master of Ethereum, 2 mana for an artifact creature, power and toughness equal to the number of artifacts you control, and our other for artifact creatures get +1/+1. Again, it's a Lord for artifacts. Beautiful. Marionette Master seems like a card that I'm hoping we have enough payoffs for. If we don't, then I think it probably just comes out. It's, of course, a lot more useful in those Oni Cult Anvil or Treasure style decks, or even Blood. But it says, whenever an artifact you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, target opponent loses life equal to Marionette's power. It's not an artifact, but remember with biotransference and some other things, we can make it artifacts. But it has Fabricate 3, so when it comes in, we can put 3 counters on it or make 3 servos. And then if we sacrifice creatures, if they die, if we do a lot of other things with them, this is probably just going to go ahead and do a good job at ending the game. So I really like Marionette Master. Fane the Broker was in the I believe it's in the Mishra Precon. And when I was putting the list together, I thought I could tell. I thought this was going to be good. Like I can see the play line for it. Like it's a really good value card, but I think it's going to end up just getting outvalued by things. Esper Sentinel, this is card draw. It's also an artifact creature, so it does lots of good things. Emery, 1 less for each artifact. When it comes in, mill 4, and then we can play artifacts back out of our graveyard. I think Emery is worth the juice here. It allows us to recur some of these artifacts if we need to pitch them for any reason or discard them for any reason for anything. We can get them back that way. If someone blows up an artifact, it can get it back from the graveyard. I think that Emery's probably worth it, but I could see the argument where other things are more important. Okay, Digsite Engineer is probably one of the single best creatures in this deck that isn't an artifact. Whenever you cast an artifact spell, you can pay 2. If you do, create a 0/0 construct with this creature gets +1/+1 for each artifact you control. Same construct we're making here, same construct we're making on Urza. I think we'll always have the spare mana for this ability. And I think Digsite Engineer is going to be one of my top tutor targets to just start getting these constructs and getting them moving. I really like Digsite Engineer, and I'm glad it's in the precon because it allows you to have access to it when you buy this deck. Cyberdrive Awakener from Neon Dynasty. Again, another copy of Rise and Shine. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Love this card. I think this is going to be really good in our list. Okay, Crypto Thrall from 40k. Other artifact creatures you control have hexproof. I've gone back and forth on this card ever since I've read it. Like in this deck, I think it seems good, but then at the same time, a lot of my legendary creatures aren't artifacts, and so maybe it doesn't do as much as I want it to do. So maybe it needs to get cut. Ormix. Filigree Thrasher seems like one of the big cards we want here. Whenever it attacks, you may discard a card. When you do, target creature defending player controls gets -X/-X until the turn, where X is the number of artifacts you control plus the number of artifact cards in your graveyard. So when it attacks, we nuke something for the amount of artifacts we have, which is a lot. My first thought was, how often are we really wanting to get rid of creatures? But then I realized this is removal that we kind of are probably going to always have access to. Urza's going to try to give it menace. I feel like Armix is going to do a lot of good. And then Alayla comes in the precon, my girl, one of my favorite commanders. Whenever we cast an artifact or enchantment spell, you get a fairy in the air. Those fairies aren't artifacts, but remember, with things like biotransference, we can give it to be an artifact. So I think Alayla, again, she just prints value kind of like Sai for this deck. And so I see a lot of scenarios where she just aids us in the process of what we're trying to do. So I very, 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 very much like that. Okay, so let's go into our artifacts. Okay, so with the artifacts, this is the slot I think needs to trim down slightly, but I don't think it's going to come down to take off the last 23 cards that we need for this deck. So there's probably going to be a lot more conversations to be had. Unwinding Clock. Seems really good. I think it's going to help us with interaction on our opponent's turns. But I can also see why it might be worth taking out in some degree. Time Sieve, again, perfect. This is going to fit into that extra turns, finish out the game that way. Thran Dynamo, man, I love the look of. I think it's a really interesting artifact. But I wonder kind of how many mana for artifacts is too many mana artifacts. And so for that reason, I think I'm going to kind of set it aside for now. Thopter, whenever one of our artifact creatures you control dies, draw a card, and then 2 and tap it for an artifact. I want to like this card. I want to like this card so much, but I think I'm going to set it to the side for now. Might in the Meekstone, again, this is what pairs with Urza, so we're going to keep this bad boy in. We've got all 3 of our talismans. Stronic Resonator seems really good. Copying a lot of different abilities. I think that'll end up coming in handy. Soul Ring, the Clamp. The Clamp's going to be good. A little bit of card draw. Sculpting Steel can come in as our copy of any other artifact we have. I think that's going to be good. It's going to allow us to kind of come down, copy a creature, come down, copy a mana artifact. I think it's going to do us a lot of good. Retrofitter Foundry, 3 to untap it, 2 to create a servo, 1 to sack a servo to make a Thopter, and sack a Thopter to make a construct. See, this is something where I think with enough mana, we can just tap and untap this to get some good value. And I think this, just to me, fits the slot over something like Thopter Shop. Orzhov Signet, I don't think we need all 3 of the signets. If we go down to our pips, we're still running pretty heavy on blue and white. So I think maybe Dimir would be blue-black, Azorius would be white-blue. Maybe we pitch the Signet for now and see if we need it and come back in. I just think we are going to have plenty of other copies. Like a Nettlecyst, one of those cards at the end of the game. Mystic Forge seems interesting. You may look at the top card of the library at any time. You can cast artifact spells or color spells from top of your library. Pay a life, exile the top card of your library. We do also have the Reality Shift, or the Reality Chip, which does the same thing. Yes, it costs less, but it's a creature. So I'm kind of going back and forth on Mystic Forge. Opal is great. It's a commander sphere as long as we have 3 more artifacts. Mox Amber is great as long as we control a legendary creature, which we have plenty of them. It taps for any mana and it comes down for 0, so it's going to trigger sign all of those. Mirage Mirror becomes a copy of anything else we have. This is going to be really good to allow us to do a lot of other things. Crypt, easy to get down, also searchable off of Urza Saga. I really like the idea of Lithiform Engine. Copying abilities, copying spells, or copying permanents we control. The cool part about this is with Lithiform Engine, we can copy Time Sieve. We can copy a lot of other things. So I think Lithiform Engine just becomes really good. Liquid Metal Torque, target non-land permanent becomes an artifact in addition to its other types until end of turn. This is going to be really good because it can make a Layla or these Urzas or something else an artifact until end of turn and get it and get it all of these abilities or buffs that we might need. Kayla's Music Box seems interesting. Tap it for a white, look at the top card of your library, then exile it face down. Until end of turn, you can play cards exiled with Kayla's Music Box. It just seems interesting because it's another piece of draw. I'm just not 100% sure how much I love it. Like, I think it's interesting. It extends our hand, but how often or not is this just going to become another artifact on the battlefield? I don't know, but I think I'm willing to deal with that for the moment. Hedron Archive, add 2 mana, sack it to draw 2 cards. I think I prefer this over Thran Dynamo just because we can pitch this if needed to get the cards. Falwar Stone, great. It's almost always going to tap for one of our colors. If we're casting a colorless spell, doesn't matter. We can tap it for any color. Executioner's Capsule comes down and kills creatures. I find it really interesting. I'm just not 100% sure if it fits what we want to do. Yes, it's an artifact. Yes, it triggers all of our cards. But I think I would rather play the enchantment, or sorry, the instant or speed exile removal over that. Decanter of Endless Water, add a mana of any color, and no maximum hand size. I like the look of this over Thought Vessel just because it adds a mana of any color, and I feel like that could become relevant. Darksteel Forge, again, I think is worth the slot. Cranial Plating gives one of our creatures a big buff. If we put this on a Layla or something like that, we can probably go in pretty high in the air. Chrome Mox, whenever it comes to the battlefield. Whenever it comes down onto the battlefield, we exile a card from our hand, and then it taps for a mana of any color on that card. This could be really good depending on what we have. If we have an extra something sitting in our hand, we pitch to the Chrome Mox, and we just get another mana rock. Chromatic Lantern seems like it's going to be really good, allowing all of our lands to tap for all of our colors, and then adding a mana of any color itself. Binding of Thassa might actually come out. I think we have enough things that do this effect, and we're going to be hurting for deck size anyway. I do love the new art for Binding of Thassa, though. I will try to work this card back in, probably. I love the idea of tapping this on someone else's turn and making all their creatures attack. So that's what the only thing that kind of makes me want to put Binding of Thassa back in. I'm kind of going back and forth on this Binding of Thassa. Like, I like it, I don't like it, I like it, I don't like it. I just, maybe we throw it back in, and if it comes down to it, we can do something else. It's Azorius Signet and the Arcane Signet. So 30 artifacts brings us down to 118. I feel like we're going to need to make a bunch of cuts across the board. It's not just going to be artifacts. I feel like there are definitely things that we need to cut. I'm thinking Ponder over Preordain. I like the card draw. I think it's still worth it. But again, I think we have lots of card draw elsewhere. I like all four of the Planeswalkers. I think they all have use. I think Karn is the Great Creator is probably the one of the four that I'm least high on, but I also think that they all seem really cool, and I want to give them a fair shot in this deck. Instance, maybe we go down that Deadly Rollick. Maybe all these 1 mana nukes are just, the 1 mana individual nukes are just better. More often than not, maybe they're just going to go and do more of what we want than that is. And I'm kind of thinking of coming down the Access Denied. As much as I love this card, maybe it's just a little too expensive for what we want to do with it. Although I really like this card, and I really want to find a way to work it back in, because I think it's a really cool card. Maybe this just isn't the deck for it. Again, Thopter Spy Network versus Binding of Thassa is an interesting thing. Which do I value more? The free artifact on the upkeep, or the common damage to a player draw a card. The only thing that interests me about this is this can work for improvise on some of those spells. So maybe Binding of Thassa wins out because it's better there. Again, Tempered Steel versus that Intangible Virtue. I still don't know. I think part of me just really wants both. It really wants to play both because Intangible Virtue is just so good. Smothering Tides, Study, Mirrored and Besieged. Part of me almost wants to take Black Market Connections out. As much as I like the card, I still think that even though it produces those treasures, I still think there's more to be had elsewhere on the list, even though it almost feels like I shouldn't, but I think I should. Going back to the creatures, I think a lot of arguments can be made to probably go down a couple more creatures. I think Marionette Master could be one, even though I like its combo potential. Maybe it isn't what I want, but at the same time, I feel like all we need is one decent board wipe to do something good. The other reason I might keep a Marionette Master is if I want to add like a Phyrexian Altar to sack my artifacts that way. We could also do that as well. This also wouldn't work bad with Time Sieve or something like that either, because it's going to see them leave. Emry is another one I really, really like, but it almost feels like it's like Emry and Armix both kind of seem like they're really good in theory, but I wonder how much good they actually do. This we have to attack with. And Emry, I kind of wonder if we have enough card draw without them, if we truly need them. I know a lot of people are going to be shouting and saying, oh, Layla doesn't really do what we want it to do, but I feel like having a secondary commander that pushes our same strategy is going to get us is going to get us creatures as long as we see this in our opening hand and we're going to be playing all these artifacts. I really feel like it's going to still work out really well for us. Again, I like the Esper Sentinel drawing us cards. I guess the argument could be made, how many cards can we really draw off of it to make it worth it? I mean, Esper Sentinel tends to be a lightning rod for removal, but again, that seems like exactly what we want it to do. Draw us a few cards if possible. If not, be a lightning rod for removal and get it out of there. I almost feel like we need to come down another piece of another instant. I feel like we probably need to keep our artifact count high, and we're already going to have to cut a few anyway. Maybe we come down the Plowshares and we can keep this, we can keep the Dispatch instead. That just brings us down another count. I feel like one of these enchantments needs to go. Is it all that glitters? Even though it buffs, we have the 2 other artifacts that do that. The other good thing about the 2 other artifacts is they can attach to anything, whereas maybe all that glitters only attaches to one creature, although I think all that glitters is really good. Maybe that's our cut for now. Maybe this is one of the things that finds its way into our final maybe board, whereas right now it just doesn't look as good. Down to 110, man. This is going to get tough. These cuts are going to get really tough here because I see a lot of really good cards I really, really like. But I don't know. Now that I cut Access Denied, parts of me wants to cut Unwinding Clock because we don't have that kind of benefit there. And we have other ways to give our things vigilance. Maybe we cut the Unwinding Clock, even though I love the idea of a Unwinding Clock. Maybe that's where it needs to be. Do we need all 3 of the talismans? We do have a lot of mana artifacts, but I feel like the talismans we want because we really want to make sure we're getting off the right hand. I like Strionic and Lithform Engine because we want to see one of them almost every time. Clamp just feels too good to cut. So does Sculpting Steel. So does the Foundry. The Foundry I feel like is more than often than not going to get us some good work. I like the Crypt. I like Liquid Metal Torque. I like the Music Box. I don't want to cut Music Box, but I almost feel like it doesn't fit this strategy we're going with. Same thing with Hedron Archive. I feel like I don't want to go down too many artifacts because I feel like we're losing this artifact sub-theme we have, but I almost feel like we still have plenty. We still have so many good ones to use. I'm almost thinking of the Chrome Mox, although it seems like such a good card. It comes down for nothing. I'm at 107, and this is tough. This is really tough. I think this is the part where it's going to get really hard because I see so many great things. I see so many great things to go for. If we come down a Planeswalker, what do we choose? I like Tezzeret. I like this Tezzeret. I don't know that I can choose. I guess it's maybe Karn's Living Legacy, but I love that ultimate, but maybe the other 3 just do more of what we're trying to do. My gut almost tells me come down a land because we'll be okay. I know someone's going to yell at me in the comments saying, no, you shouldn't be playing 33 lands. You should be playing 36. Traditionally, I don't have much issue with that, and we have a ton of mana rocks, and that we're pretty low on the spectrum here, which makes me feel like we can probably go down a land. So as much as I'm going to probably get some heat in the for some people are out there going to go, you're only playing 33 lands, you should be playing more. I completely understand, but I still think I'm going to choose to go down the land anyway. And let's cut the Fetid Heath, I guess. I think the white-black lands are the best there. Down to 105. War of Vengeance I just see being really good, but maybe it's not as much as I think it is. Maybe I'm putting too much value on War of Invention, but the only thing about it is the Improvise. The Improvise makes me really like it. How many tutors are really necessary? Maybe we go down the Diabolic Intent. I feel like it's probably not that bad. It probably does us a lot of good, but maybe we come down the tutor because I don't really know what else to lose of. I mean, I think my Magical Christmas Land, Luminarch Ascension, has probably got to come out. I think more often than not, I think it's taking slots away from artifacts that need to be there. I almost feel like we should play Intangible Virtue over Tempered Steel. But the argument could be made that both of them would still be good. I almost even feel like favorable wins over one of those might be good as well. But I really like the idea of Tempered Steel. I feel like it comes down and it buffs literally everything we have already. It just seems good. Like, I love the idea of Muzio, but maybe Muzio is too slow. Maybe it doesn't fit this kind of go wide strategy we're going for. Maybe that's kind of where we've gotten there. We're down to 102. Yeah, I think I'm stuck at 102, guys. This is tough. It's tough because I think this is the point where we just have to say, okay, cut two things, and we're going to have to test the deck to see if they need to come back in. So I think we're going to cut a Talisman. And I think we're going to cut... We'll cut the Talisman. That gets us down to 101, and now I'm having a really tough decision on the last card. I'm eyeing up Biotransference because at this point, we're just using it for its bottom ability, but its bottom ability seems really good. Right now I'm looking at the artifacts, seeing if there's anything else, but I want to keep my artifact count high. I want to keep it really high. Reality Chip seems like it's really good, but it's also, I guess, feels like it's really, really good. Man, I have no idea. I'm up a creek right now trying to figure out what to cut. I feel like it's the wrong choice, but I'm going to cut Fairy's Protection. Okay, we got to get it down to 100. We got to make a decision. I think we're going to end up getting into decision paralysis if we don't pick something. Okay, so there's our 100. We made it down to 100. So let's do a quick playtest and see what it looks like. We get a land with one land that comes in tapped and a Arcane Signet. So let's mulligan. Here we see 3 lands and some decent. So let's keep it. We're going to draw for turn. We get into a Vault of Champions. Crypt. Question here is, do we Nettle Cyst or do we leave up this tutor? I think we'd leave up the E-tutor and we would go get something, draw for the next turn, Darksteel Citadel. Actually, I think the better choice is the Ruins there. Get the double blue, go into Urza, and then we'd have that thing we tutored for. Next turn, drop the Darksteel Citadel down, play the Efficient Construction, and I think we see some sort of play line there. So let's try it. Let's try it again. 2 lands. We have Piece of Removal. We have the Signet. We have Urza. I think we try this. Draw for turn. Exotic Orchard, draw for turn. I think we probably have to shock that Fountain in for the Signet. Draw for turn. Sea of Clouds into the... Probably Sea of Clouds into Heuristic Study there. And then next turn, we Urza have 1 mana left, and we use it for the Strionic. And then move into the next turn, probably hit this Monkey there. Okay, so not too bad. Again, I think it's going to take me a lot of learning these play lines to know where exactly the deck goes. And I have a feeling some of these cards are going to end up coming back in. I mean, remember, all of this deck's is doing, what I think on the first time looking at this deck. I feel like after a little bit of testing, I probably learned that a lot of these need to come back in. But there we go, guys. Urza, Chief Artificer, Millzy Brews. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will catch you next time.